Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am Dr. Claudia Albers, Planet X research and professional physicist. And today I'd like to bring to you another one of my articles. This one is entitled, "The Bible Talks of a Sun Simulation System and the Sun Being Darkened." Now in Revelation 8 verse 12 we read, "And the fourth angel sounded, and the third part of the sun was smitten, and the third part of the moon, and the third part of the stars, so as the third part of them was darkened, and the day shone not for a third part of it, and the night likewise." Now, so we are told that a third part of the sun, a third part of the moon, and a third part of the stars were hit or smitten, so that a third part of them was darkened, causing a third part of the day and a third part of the night not to shine. But how can a third part of the sun be hit and that result in a third part of the day not to shine? If a third part of the sun is darkened, then there is still 2/3 of it to shine. If we were talking about the real sun, the part remaining would still provide light enough to continue illuminating the earth without any interruption. In the case of the moon, if 1/3 of it was destroyed, we would still have the other 2/3 reflecting light from the sun, and that reflected light would be seen from the earth whenever the moon was in the correct position, and would thus continue to illuminate the earth at night, as shown here. Even if it's broken, the moon, the part that remains, would still reflect light and illuminate the earth. How about the stars? How can something which hits the sun and the moon also hit the stars? The stars are at huge distances from Earth. Well, presumably this also refers to the planets. But even so, how can something hit the sun, moon, planets, and stars at the same time and cause an exact proportion of them to be damaged, 1/3 at the same time? The only way to solve this puzzle is to realize that this passage is not talking about the real sun, the real moon, and the real stars. This passage is talking about the simulation system which is now in operation, which simulates the sun, moon, planets, and stars in our sky. And you may look at article 388 entitled "The Sun is No Longer Shining. Sun Simulators Replace the Sun." If 1/3 of the system is damaged, then 1/3 of the sun simulation, moon simulation, planet and star simulation would stop working. Think of it as a gigantic planetarium holographically projected on the Earth's atmosphere. The projection remains stationary with respect to the sun whilst the Earth rotates, thus simulating the sky. A daylight sky is projected on one side and a nighttime sky is projected on the other side. And so basically the Earth's atmosphere would become like a planetarium with the objects being holographically projected onto it. There should be several components to the system. The lighting would most likely be provided by laser satellites in a sun-synchronous polar orbit, which would place them at an altitude of between 600 and 1,000 kilometers above the Earth's surface. There will also most likely be several components in the atmosphere, such as hexagonal mirror arrays and lensing systems. These would move with respect to the surface at the same speed of rotation as the Earth, but in the opposite direction, so that they would remain stationary with respect to the projection system. And this is how I have envisioned this projection system. I have divided the Earth into 12 panels. We have 6 daylight panels, 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, and then 6 nighttime panels. The daylight panels would always face the center of the solar system where the sun is. So the center here would be the midday position, and this would always face the center of the sun. And therefore, each panel I have divided into 6 sectors. So here's one sector. So there would be a holographic projection of the sky onto each sector, and the lighting would be provided by the satellites, which are in polar orbits and thus always remain over a certain time zone. So these would be the midday position satellites, and they would move along in their orbit, and as they pass each panel, they project the sky onto that sector, and as they move down to the next sector, they start projecting it onto the next sector. And I think that you would need at least 6 satellites over each panel. There may actually be a need for more, but I think a minimum of 6. So here's the first orbit over this first panel, and then the next orbit over the next panel. So in total, there would be 6 orbits, because each orbit goes over 2 panels, one daylight panel and one nighttime panel on the other side of the Earth. And this projection system does not rotate. It remains stationary with respect to the sun's position. The Earth's surface and the Earth's atmosphere does rotate within it. This is the direction of rotation here of the Earth's surface and the atmosphere, but the projection system would stay in place. So it would be a perfect simulation of the actual sky, with the sun being here and nighttime being in the opposite direction. You can see the moon, a place moon, and stars. This would be the things that would be projected onto the atmosphere as it passes below that projection point. And there would most likely be devices that would be in the atmosphere, such as this sun simulation device, which appears to be an array of hexagonal mirrors. As you can see, it is amongst the clouds, so it seems to be at cloud altitude, and that means that part of the system would be in the atmosphere, devices like this, and they would most likely be propelled by an anti-gravity drive system. And they would be propelled in the opposite direction to the Earth's rotation and at the same rate, so that they remain stationary with respect to the projection system, and thus the devices that belong to a sector remain with that sector stationary with respect to the projection system. Now, if 1/3 of it is damaged, then we will have a total of 12 panels. That means 4 panels would be damaged. And in this illustration, I've placed the first 2 daylight panels and the first 2 nighttime panels. And that would correspond to the first 4 hours of daylight after sunrise not working, and the first 4 hours after sunset not working. So each observer on the face of the Earth would in turn not have full lights of daytime at the beginning of the day as the Earth rotates and each observer rotates underneath the projection system. They would not have the first 4 hours of daylight. They would not have the first 4 hours of nighttime. There would just not be anything there to see. What would they see instead? Probably something like you would see here. This is what downtown Cleveland looked like the other day in the middle of the night. And it looks like this because of the luminescence generated by the stellar core dust entering the Earth's atmosphere. So it produces very light skies. And the observer would see the same whether these sections were above or those sections. Basically a nighttime sky because there's no sun, but brightened due to the luminescence generated by the stellar core matter entering the atmosphere all the time. There would most likely also be pink and red portions because the luminescence, the energy absorption process leads to luminescence sometimes in these very bright colors. And now the devices in the atmosphere seem to be in the atmosphere at about cloud altitude. And if they are at 10 kilometers, then they would be moving at the speed. So I placed them at an orbital radius of 6,381 kilometers. So that's from the center of the Earth. And that the period is 24 hours. They would have then a speed of 1,671 kilometers per hour or 1,037 miles per hour. And that corresponds to Mach 1.4 or 40% faster than the speed of light. It's a bit faster than a passenger jet, but not impossible for a fighter jet, and very easy with an anti-gravity drive, which would draw energy from the atmosphere. And this would be what the satellite orbits would look like from above the North Pole. This would be the lighting provided by the projection system. So it would look like the sun is over here somewhere, shining onto the atmosphere. It's all being projected holographically, and the satellites are the ones providing the laser light for that. So each panel making up the sky simulate would need a whole fleet of satellites, and I would say a minimum of 6. And if we take into account that the satellites orbit around the Earth, as you can see, this the one daylight sector here, or the daylight panel here, and the nighttime panel here, that makes one orbit. So there would be 12 satellites in each orbit, and there would be 6 different orbits. And that would mean that we'd need a minimum of 72 satellites. If 1/3 of the system gets damaged, then 24 of those satellites would be damaged. However, since part of the system is in the atmosphere, as I said, it is possible that it is not the satellites that get damaged, but the devices inside the atmosphere which transmit and reflect the light coming from the satellites. Or it could be that both the satellites and the devices in the atmosphere get damaged. Now, the reason why the sun simulation system has been placed in operation is because the sun is no longer shining. And again, you may look at that article 388 on that. In other words, the sun has been darkened just as the Bible predicts it would at the end times. And we read in Isaiah 13 verse 10, "For the stars of heaven and the constellations thereof shall not give their light. The sun shall be darkened in his going forth, and the moon shall not cause a light to shine." The sun shall be darkened. And in Mark 13 verse 24, "But in those days after that tribulation, the sun shall be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light. The sun shall be darkened." The moon would not give light, because if there is no sun, then there is no light for the moon to reflect. The same is true for the planets. In addition, the huge number of stellar cores coming to the Earth, it's likely that the moon would be illuminated by the light which they emit, thus allowing us to see a red or pink moon now and then. In addition, the huge amount of debris and dust generated by the stellar cores may also obscure at least some of the stars, hence the need to holographically project the whole sky. In conclusion, the Bible indicates that 1/3 of the sky projection system we have in operation right now would be damaged. This system is in operation because the sun has been darkened, just as predicted by the Bible, indicating that we are in the end times, and that the author of the Bible is the creator of the universe, God himself, who is also the truth, for he said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." This is Dr. Claudia Albers, Planet X physicist. Thank you for watching.